Hi everyone, this is Casey with Three-Headed Monster. I'm going to run you through a couple of the rules for our brand new game Beyond Humanity, Astrominers. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll be demonstrating the game on Tabletop Simulator. There is a link for you to play it for free right now if you own the system, so feel free to navigate over there and check it out yourself after watching this video. When you take it down to the basics, in Astrominers, players will focus on acquiring resources from asteroids and converting them into victory points because, hopefully there's no surprise, at the end of the game, the one who collects the most victory points wins. Asteroids, which I mentioned before, play a bit of a secondary role because the actual actions take place on a space station from which our Astrominers will fly out on subsequent missions and to which they will return after those missions are completed. Players will use workers every round represented by symbols on the dice and will invest them on the board, missions, to acquire cards and resources, or even take over the first player position. First of all, there's the board on which the game is played. There are fields for collecting resources, cards, sending missions, or even becoming the first player. In addition to the board, there are 4 decks of cards in the game. These are the deck of order cards, which is the primary source of victory points. After paying the fee listed on the cards, players secure the number of victory points shown on it at the end of the game. A deck of mission cards are our primary source of raw materials. Players obtain resources from all completed missions on which they have invested their dice, both from their own missions and those who belong to other players. Then there are the Achievement and Executive card decks. These cards allow you to earn additional victory points, send additional missions, and give you additional opportunities. And a deck of resource exchange cards. If at any time you need to pay with a raw material that you don't have, you can replace it with other raw materials according to the markings on the exchange card drawn for the game. Speaking of raw materials, there are 7 types of materials in the game. There are 3 basic resources, plasteel, water, and xenon, which you'll be able to obtain both from missions and from the game board. And there are 4 rare resources, gold, tungsten, nickel, and palladium, which can only be achieved by sending your workers on missions or as a special bonus ability from certain executive cards. Each player has 2 other game elements which are color-coded to the player. They will each have a set of 7 dice from which they will be able to play, as well as 2 colored barges which are used to display their missions while in the docks. There are 4 symbols on the player's dice. The inspector symbol, which can be placed on the board in a vacant dispatch field, allows the player to take 1 mission card into their hand. The geologist symbol, which when placed on the board in a vacant refinery field, enables the player to take 1 order card into their hand. The minor and subroutine symbols can be invested on the corresponding board and mission fields, which will bring more resources to the player. These 2 symbols can appear on the dice as a single or double icon. This demonstration game is currently set up for 3 players. First, this means that you have removed all mission cards and order cards intended for more than 3 players back to the box. And secondly, during the game, you will not be using any fields with a 4+ marking. In preparation for the game, players also lay out the achievement cards, executive cards, and 1 random resource exchange card. 1 of each resource token should also be represented on the first 7 fields of the round tracker. To complete preparation for the game, each player then grabs their set of colored dice with the matching barges, 1 raw material of each type, and then the players will determine who will become the first player of the game. The way we like to determine the first player is to grab 1 of the colored dice from each player and, without looking, randomly select 1. That player can be the first player. There are a few other options described in the instruction manual, but feel free to make up your own rules as well. A full game will last 8 rounds, during which players will try to collect as many victory points as possible. They can acquire them by order cards. After paying the specified fee, each will give you the number of victory points as stated on the card. Sending missions, because each completed mission gives 1 victory point. Achievement cards, which give the number of points indicated on them. Executive cards. And lastly, raw materials. The more you accumulate, the more options you have for making additional victory points at the end of the game. So what does each of the 8 rounds look like? To make it easier, we'll move back in time to the middle of the game. You will start each round by rolling your dice to know which workers you will have available in that round. After your first roll, each player is entitled to one reroll of any number of dice. After determining your final dice pool, each player proceeds to perform their actions in order. Players perform actions one at a time, clockwise, starting with the first player. In a single action, each player can perform one of 3 basic actions. The first is to place a die on one of the available die sockets on the board or on a die socket on an active mission card. If an active mission has a free die socket available on it, you may place a die with a matching symbol in that socket. Or you may place that die on the board. You immediately take the resource or card associated with that field. Please note the number of symbols on the dice matter, not the number of dice. So each die with 2 symbols will bring you 2 resources. Also, please note that the first basic resource field will give you 1 additional resource. Mission and order cards that have been taken should be replaced right away. In this way, you can also take over the function of the first player spot with any symbol. The fields of the Achievement and Executive cards are unique, so let's go over them now. These cards, characterized by their red color, are reserved by the player with a die, regardless of its symbol. Thus, they are executed immediately without taking them into your hand. By placing a die on the Achievement card field, a player discards the required set of their completed missions and draws that prize to their completed card pile. Placing a die on the Expedition card field, the player pays it off and puts it out immediately as their mission to dock. The player also occupies any number of fields marked in yellow with their dice. By placing a die on a field of a technology or bulletin card, the player pays the required fee and takes that card into their completed card pile. The special ability of these cards are reusable. Those abilities can be used by the owner until the end of the game. The second type of action you could perform is to start a new mission in the docks. To do this, you take a mission card from your hand, pay its cost, and place it on your barge in any free dock. At the same time, you may fill any number of yellow dice sockets with the appropriate symbol dice from your pool. Dice can also be used without consuming actions. A player can sacrifice 1 dice from their pool to change any other to any symbol they choose, re-roll any number of dice remaining in their pool, or exchange one of their resources for another from the bank. After all players have exhausted their actions, or folded, check which player has placed the most dice on missions. All missions, not just their own. The winner gets several resources assigned to that round as a reward. The amount of resources is described in the diagram, as there can be a tie. The payers then proceed to settle their missions. Owners of completed missions filled with dice will take them back and return each player their dice and associated rewards for that mission. Barges that have not filled all of their dice sockets in this round move out 1 position on the dock. If a barge has not filled all of its dice sockets in 2 rounds, it is unsuccessful and abandoned. The mission card from that barge will go into the discard pile, and the dice will be returned to players without yielding any resources. After all missions have been settled and once everyone has their resources, each player has the right to redeem 1 order card from their hand. To do so, a player pays a set of raw material costs visible on the order card to the bank and puts it face up in their pool of completed cards. Each order card, in addition to victory points, gives the player a one-time opportunity to use its special ability. Abilities range from reducing any cost by 1 resource, freely exchanging worker dice, starting missions for free, or buying additional cards in a round. After using a card's ability, the player turns the card face down. And that's what each of the 8 rounds of Astrominers looks like. You roll dice, perform actions, clear missions, award a prize, and redeem order cards. After you finish a round, you move on to the next until the game is over. After 8 rounds, all players tally up their victory points. For example, let's see how many points the blue player scored. The total of their order cards is 22. Each of the 5 missions completed is worth 1 victory point. They also managed to get an achievement for 4 points. They also bought 2 executive cards. And for resource sets, they were able to rack up 5 points. So the blue player has accumulated a total of 42 victory points. Thank you so much for checking out this video with me today. If you still have any questions about any of the rules, I invite you to visit the campaign page, as there is a link to the latest version of our manual. or feel free to contact us. In either case, we wish you all the best and we hope to see you out there amongst the stars.